Hello, everyone. It's a very smiley, happy picture of me that'll stand over as I present. So, one, I apologize in advance. I probably have the worst accent out of anyone in this room, being not from New York, but actually New Jersey. One funny fact about me is that I actually went to school with The Situation, for any Jersey Shore fans. So this is very real. No matter what people tell you, that's the case. But I'm not going to present on that today. We could talk about it during drinks. So I'm talking about blockchain. How many people are familiar with blockchain? How many people are so frustrated by people talking about it that they just don't even care to learn, right? So it's the biggest problem. So I'm going to kind of break down what blockchain actually is and the philosophies of why I believe it is important. And hopefully, I could be the one to do this in the right way because I have the same background as all of you. I most recently came from the Washington Post, where I led innovation. Again, another loaded word. But to break it down, really focusing on new media models and practices to help companies like the Washington Post and the technologies that we were building help not just be reactive in this media ecosystem, but be somewhat proactive, right? To try to chart our own territory and not be so over-reliant on the changes and the influences, right, that come on from the platforms and incoming technologies like blockchain. Prior to that, I was briefly at Time Inc., where I ran product across all of the properties. And the earliest point of my career, I accidentally was at the Huffington Post. And I actually got the Huffington Post job through an ad on Craigslist. So that should tell you how early I was there and how early in media the Huffington Post was. But that's really where I started to learn and think about where attention within media companies goes and whether or not that is the right way to allocate focus and awareness and time when it comes to building your brand. At the Post, the Huffington Post, this was back in 2010, we built something called social marketing, right? And social marketing now is what we call native advertising or content marketing, and a concept that has existed over decade and decade, but called something new and different to reinvent itself, but to kind of lean in and, again, help us be proactive in our storytelling and be able to chart our own path and chart our own course. At the Huffington Post, nobody wanted to work on advertising, right? Nobody wanted to work on the business side of media because everyone just thought that it was dead and that you couldn't be creative there. So for me, besides the fact that you get paid more if you work on the business side than on the editorial side, I saw it as a huge opportunity, right? To be able to say, let's build something new, right? Let's have new conversations. Let's invest in our future. So we built native, we built a lot of ad products there, and we sold to AOL for $320 million. And what, I didn't make any money there, so don't look at me like I was financially successful. But what it really was able to forge and prove to me is that no one really knows anything, right? We're all constantly thinking about what we're going to have to do to survive. And I think Tom put it really well earlier, which I've never thought of it this way, but like, we could be calm with our approach, right? We should be confident in knowing the power of what we could really be doing. And we should also be confident in knowing that we know our business better than anyone else, right? So as Facebook and Google and new applications and people encroach, right, on what our business is, they don't know exactly what it is that we do extremely well. Right? That's the ace in our back pocket. So towards the end of my tenure at the Washington Post, I really became over-obsessed with this notion of premium. Everybody is a premium publisher, right, today. But nobody could tell me what that word means. And we at the Post were really trying to figure out how can we justify and how do we convey why someone should subscribe to the Washington Post? Or how do we convey why someone should turn off their ad blocker, right? Or all of these means, which are ways that we make money. And the way that we convey it right? And we could argue about UX issues all day with that approach, is good journalism costs money. So we need you to pay for it. And it's not that consumers don't want to pay for it. We are just not explaining ourselves in a meaningful way, right? There really is no way to extract the work and the effort and the value that goes into everything that everyone does when it comes to building creative works, so that consumers could better understand what it is they're paying for and why they value it. So that is why I jumped to start Po.et. And Po.et, in its notion and in its core, is, can we build something that isn't necessarily reliant on a single company or a single platform, but something that is open source and network built that allows every single person in this room and everyone who is working within this business to help influence and create it? The media business is extremely cyclical, as everyone here knows. And I would be the first person, especially at the Washington Post, when a blockchain company or an AI or MR or any acronym you could think of that, again, is extremely frustrating, comes in, I would be the first one to say no, right? And I would say no either because we couldn't necessarily focus on it at the time, or because I wanted to build it myself. And I think the best technologies that are really looking to shift culture, right, and shift the way of thinking and make actual impact should take the time and study what it is they're actually looking to disrupt. When you think about how media is set up, and I'm sure within these rooms, those that work at media companies or those that work with media companies know that the two sides of how a media company runs are completely contradictory. There's the opposite incentives. They oftentimes don't work with one another. They're paid, right, by the same central accounting company, but they think very different about their day-to-day and what they could do to not just help grow and impact the business, but how they could be best perceived, right, in this world of media and advertising. And when new technologies and focuses come in, they don't necessarily understand that there is a huge nuance between how both of these sides work. That the way that content works is essentially a product. It is the thing that people want to pay for. It is the reason why consumers are coming to the site or buying the paper, as we learned print is still alive this morning, or watching TV, because they want that product. The media side is a business and needs to operate like a business and needs to make sure that it's really thinking about growth and bringing value and highlighting those efforts of what is happening on the content side. And what I think is very important, especially as we think about new ways of doing things and opportunities that could be done on the blockchain, that we're not necessarily looking to disrupt the product, right? The value and the integrity and the reputation of what your media companies could bring. We're looking to open up new opportunities for the business. So what happened to media, right, and media companies? Content has become commoditized, right? Our friends at Facebook have really made it clear that all content is created equal, right? That if it is a news article or a video or a lifestyle piece, that you're going to get paid the same CPM, right? Even though an investigative journalism article may have taken $500,000 and 6 months to create, and a cute puppy video might have taken 10 minutes. We've really commoditized those works, right? We haven't done a great job at conveying what the efforts are that goes behind what we value as premium. Fraud is a major issue. So again, we'll go into it deeper because a lot of what I'll talk about with blockchain is the bullshit of blockchain. And hopefully I could explain it to you simply without that fluff. But fraud is a big thing tied to blockchain and this notion of how can you make sure that your dollars are being spent correctly, or that information is safe, or that your data isn't being misused, and that you necessarily have more control than you did yesterday. And the last is we've really lost control of digital assets, right? And it's not necessarily always done on purpose. If you go on your phone right now and you Google image anything, Because of how iOS application works, if you have an Apple phone, you could just put your thumb on that image and save it to your camera drive. And you don't necessarily want to steal that image. But it is the only way that you could save that image on your phone is literally to take it and not have credit issued to that creator. So this notion of how our assets are used and how creative is used is basically something that we no longer control or have the effort or focus in order to do so to really make sure that we could then regain that power. And I've really been calling this proof of effort and proof of results. Everything in media, right, and everything that we think of, especially if we're looking at media as a business and content as the product. If we look at media, the value and the benefits and what we look at as success has everything to do with the results. How many subscriptions did it drive? How many clicks? How many referrals? Did it go viral? How much money did it make me? And has zero to do with the effort and the actual reason why a consumer or anyone is actually wanting to read your content. I don't go to the Washington Post because the Washington Post hit 100 million UVs last month, or that they have 1 million digital subscribers. I go to the Washington Post because the Washington Post is curated by Marty Baron, who is one of the most esteemed editors ever, and I trust him to deliver me this news. That is not the way that we pay or look or value success. And that is a huge problem when it comes to our industry, especially as we're thinking of losing our IP to distribution and elsewhere on platforms. So the web is really built on two things today. And where I think blockchain really comes in is bringing in a third. So there's this huge obsession with time and recency. So the web and discoverability is built off recency. And apologies for the slides. I'm an engineer, so I am not artistic. But it's built off recency, right? You want to be able to search for content and get information based on the last time that it was published. You want to be able to sort based on a certain time frame. And that's how you get your information through major channels, whether that is on the homepage of a site or whether that is the timeline of a social application, even though those applications are now changing the way those timelines work. But it's a huge component of how the web works is recency. And the second thing is relevancy, right? How can I search for something and get a result of information based on exactly what I was looking for? If I look for fake news, the top result, if I'm looking in any sort of timeline or way to get information, should be verbatim. And if you actually drop down all results, Google has verbatim as an option, and the time that it takes to get there. And unfortunately, what's really happened is that it hasn't just been the way that we've discovered and have found content. It's changed the way that creators create content. So when I was at the Huffington Post, the day that Michael Jackson passed away, our newsroom wrote an article. And the headline was, "Michael Jackson passes away due to accidental overdose. Doctor investigated." And the first thing we did before that article went live was change the headline to "Michael Jackson Dead." And the reason why we did that was because we knew that that is what everyone was going to be searching for. And had zero to do with creative integrity, had zero to do with delivering the right information to the consumer in a timely manner, and had everything to do with the proof of results. The ability to win in search, and the ability, right, to go viral and be discovered. And that is a problem, right? It's a problem for a business, and the panel up here that was discussing earlier about reputation and truth and why readers read their content. And there's an assumption that consumers believe and just understand without us telling them that their content is valuable and it is the truth. But if we're actually changing the way that we create based on how we're rendering results, then we are actually changing the value that these consumers originally saw in our works. So the third R that I've been adding is reputation. And this is something that all the conversations I've had is very much missing from the web. It's really hard to be able to pinpoint or put nutrition on an article or a piece of information or authorship. There's really no way for algorithms in a very meaningful way to be able to categorize, right, and organize information in a reputable way, the same way that they would based on time or the way that you search them verbatim. And this is where blockchain is really going to come in and change the opportunities, and because I'm not going to necessarily be presumptuous and say we're changing the way that we use the web, because that's yet to be seen and must be proven. But it offers a new opportunity for us to think differently, for us to put more value and emphasis on what we do, which is create valuable content, information, and experiences. So the day after I left the Washington Post, I was so sure that blockchain was going to change the world and that the media industry needed it so badly. And Paul Ford, who writes frequently for Bloomberg Businessweek and has a company called Po.et and is an amazing technologist, wrote an article that said Bitcoin is dangerous and blockchain is idiotic or something like that. So I immediately called the Washington Post and begged for my job back. And just kidding. But what was within that article that I think is extremely important is that what if the most important thing about this, right, and blockchain is a way to build culture, is a way to make us non-complacent and to push us out of certain comfort zones to really think differently. And you're kind of seeing that today. And not to say that that makes it a meaningful technology or that that makes it a further meaningful approach, but it's either frustrating people so much or people are so invested and gung-ho on it that people are just talking and really thinking deep about ways that either it will never work or that it will work. And that's exciting for an industry that has nonetheless felt somewhat stuck in their opportunity to write their own story. And I really think to fix media and the business, we really have to think about how to build a new culture. So before we really get into the definition of blockchain, the web has been very good at incentivizing behaviors, right, in order to push actions. Early Huffington Post example is that we grew and surpassed the New York Times and CNN and became the most visited and viewed digital news brand on the web, not just because of clickbait headlines and not just because we were an aggregator, but we actually built an intrinsic incentivized system in our comment section. And what we basically did was we built self-governance in the comments by awarding badges to our readers who did things that helped build a better community within the Huffington Post. And what happened is over 2011, or 2010 to 2011, we went from an average of 1,000 comments per article on the Huffington Post, because they were massive, to about 7,000 to 8,000 comments per article. And that was because users were going in there and wanted to earn badges in order to upgrade to other opportunities on the Huffington Post, which meant curating conversations, which meant being able to blog, which meant being able to build your own vertical, and really start to become part of the community, but actually a creator on the Huffington Post. And those incentivized behaviors are exactly kind of what you're hearing with the nuances of what's blockchain, what's Bitcoin, and why do I care. It's extremely important as we break it down to understand that these are incentivized structures that we are looking to do to help build a new culture and to help get to a common goal. So what is blockchain? I bet you thought I wouldn't get to this and I was just going to get off stage. So I think when you think about what is blockchain, right, we really have to separate it from what cryptocurrencies are and what crypto assets are. The one thing that I am very keen on saying, because I think you see counter arguments, is that I believe that these things need to go together, right? I think when you talk about blockchain and Bitcoin, the first thing you say is, well, I know Bitcoin, but what's blockchain and how are they different? I actually think they don't work unless you have some sort of incentivized structure on the database. So what is blockchain? right? Everyone thinks blockchain is this if you go on Twitter. But blockchain is actually this. And really simply put, today I will explain blockchain to you in 3 words. And it's basically just a distributed, immutable ledger. And what that means in human terms is that it is a list of information that cannot be changed. Because it is distributed, it is run by a network of individuals who contribute. So if all of us today had a conversation that was recorded on the blockchain, and if someone said something that they wanted erased, they would not be able to do so without everyone in this room saying, OK, let's erase it. The other notion of it is that it is immutable, right? So these things, which I combine those things. So that is just all it is. It is a stupid database of information that just lives immutably for public and everyone to see. So when you think of it like that, then it makes a lot of sense when people are going out and saying, this is our blockchain strategy. And is anyone in here from IBM? OK, good, because IBM shifted their entire marketing focus, right, to blockchain. What does that even really mean? And I think what it is that we need to learn, right, from old technologies and old behaviors and ways of doing things in order to bring new things into this future. So what I want to go through quickly is that this notion of blockchain and the excitement behind it and what it is today is not necessarily new. In 1976, there was the Diffie-Hellman key exchange, which was basically this way of how to encrypt and decrypt information. How can we send information quickly and anonymously throughout certain systems? In 1989, there was something called DigiCash, which was the first form of digital payments created by David Chaum, who is still very active in this community, to really start to think of this notion of how can I transfer information and transfer money very quickly, somewhat autonomously, right, through a ledger of public information. Then there was Napster, which, depending on the crowd, many people don't remember what Napster was, but I'm going to assume here that everyone does. Then there's this notion of like Napster, and this idea that, OK, well, we are not able to get the information that we somewhat need, so we are going to get together and build something that's going to give us something new that is not necessarily available today. And with these all 3 things together, you really start to think about not just blockchain as a distributed ledger that stores information, but what the culture of blockchain really is. And what the culture of blockchain is as it pairs with Bitcoin, which I'm using as there's many tokens, but I assume that that is the one that if anyone knows, that's the one that they'll likely know. And what is that value of those 2 things together? And I think what you're really seeing is this new sensation of people looking to transact on information. And in the case of Bitcoin, it's actual money. But I like to use information because we're talking about things that are on a ledger and could be anything in a faster way that doesn't require anyone in the middle to approve whether or not this could go through or this cannot. And that does not have a single point of failure, right? This idea that it is managed by everybody really allows us to make sure that the information there is correct and cannot be destroyed. So Brad Garlinghouse is a former Yahoo executive. He wrote the Peanut Butter Manifesto, which is a highly criticized article about the future of media. And now he's at Ripple, which is one of the larger cryptocurrencies. But he said maybe Bitcoin can be the Napster of digital assets. And what I often like to use in this case is an example of how we, as the media industry, should be thinking about a technology like blockchain and a culture and behavior like Bitcoin. The beauty of what's happened is that Bitcoin and blockchain, for better or worse, has already disrupted, and we're all still here. So unlike what happened in the music business in 1999 and 2000, when Napster came along and basically disintermediated and put companies like Tower Records and others out of business, we are still in business, and we are still absolutely fine. But there is an awareness and an understanding that the culture behind what is happening here and the technology of what it could bring is a confine that we may want to build in. How does this apply to media? Is that for those who remember and use Napster, it was a really shitty product. But it was the only way to get mass amounts of music at a given time. The music you would get would be bad quality. Oftentimes the song would be cut off. Oftentimes the artist was wrong, right, for the song that you were doing. And anyone who has an old iPod probably looks through and realizes that a lot of it is misinformation there. But what bloomed out of that were new economies and new products and platforms that built a healthy ecosystem for the music industry. There is now something, and we'll use Spotify for an example, that we willingly pay for because we understand the product that we're getting, the verification of that information. We know that it is going to be a good quality, even though I don't believe that Spotify is the best quality for music. But it's something that we trust because we built a way for us to be able to have a new marketplace and have a new vision for how we convey the value of that to consumers. So what we're really looking to do here is build a bridge to a better web. We're really looking to say, how can we use blockchain to help build reputation on the next web? So I hate text on slides, but I put it up here again because I am an engineer and I am not artistically creative to put all of this into an image. But the notion of what is new on the web and what makes it extremely valuable is how can we build layers of verifiability? How can we really start to expose the good information from the bad information? How are we able to create new signals that aren't necessarily reliant on what Facebook and Google and other toll booths say we should see and should not see? And how do we do that in a way that isn't just one company engaging and focusing on it, but a collective of smart individuals that are really looking to build a better economy for the media space? And this is happening in 4 ways. Attribution, which is how do we know the authorship of information? How can we confirm that sources, and not sources for writing an article, but sources cited, are in fact the sources that were cited in information? How can we start finding out who's paying for information to be distributed on the web? How do we battle the worst term of all time, fake news? And how can we really start playing in the middle of the information space where it's not necessarily right or wrong, but by pulling out verifiable information, we start to better educate ourselves, right? We give better nutrition for people who seek information by being able to show the ingredients behind what we're about to consume. Then there's this notion of discovery, right? How do we get more information and content out there? Where blockchain really opens up this opportunity is 2 ways. The obvious one is now people aren't necessarily reliant on those who purchase content to have a bank account or to be approved with a credit card or to use amazing technologies like Stripe, which is, I think, available in 24 countries. Cryptocurrencies and the wallets that are being created are available everywhere. You do not need a bank account to acquire a cryptocurrency. All you need is to be able to go on the internet and have an internet wallet and purchase it. And it's actually extremely cheap to do so. Now, a Bitcoin today is probably worth $6,200, I hope, if it's not continuing to crash. But you could buy a partial Bitcoin. You know, it's not like a dollar bill where you can't rip a dollar bill in half and have 50 cents, right? Digital money allows you to buy components of that. And as a creator and someone looking to license content, you now have the opportunity to open it up. So the AP, who I speak with often about this, their motto is we reach 2/3 of the world. There's a lot of factors in that, but one is financial and people that are actually able to purchase content and areas of the world that don't necessarily have payment systems set up. Well, now the AP reaches 100% of the world because they could open up opportunity for anyone who has digital currencies to pay. There's this notion of monetization, right? And really starting to rethink what it means to build on the bottom line. What it means for us to be able to show value in our content. Are we charging subscribers the right amount? How do we even know, right? Rather than just beta testing and seeing what they'll pay, if we could start really showing reputation and value, maybe our content is extremely undervalued, which I firmly believe. And this boils down to this level of reputation, right? How do we build a nutritional label for the web that is decentralized? It is not a fox guarding the henhouse of Facebook or Google saying if the Australian is right or wrong or good news or bad news, but a collective of individuals who all contribute to this ecosystem to help build what these layers and focuses should be for truthful, verifiable content. Attribution of data becoming cohesive and transparent, I think, is very important, right? We do not know what value on the web looks like because we have never worked together to really say so. And there are so many factors that go into this, which is why it needs to be a collective of people focusing on this in order to do so. An article may be extremely well written, and it took 20 minutes to write with an author that has proven to been that author that broke a scandal, which is extremely valuable. And that is kind of easy to quantify in a data set. But you may read an op-ed piece from someone within Donald Trump's White House that really doesn't have any necessary facts or research, but that is saying that the White House is alarmed because of what is going on in here. And how do you prove reputation and value there if it's not necessarily quantifiable of an author or a time or a transaction? And how do we build that set of information to expose that? This idea of discovery is really trying to figure out how we can limit misinformation. Again, those who follow news in the United States, it is a fog storm of misinformation and a tactic, right, used by very high officials in order to get misinformation out there so that people become exhausted trying to sift through and gain the right information. But how do we make truth really cheap to ascertain and lying expensive? How do we use the blockchain so that when people make verifiable claims like I am the author and these are the sources I used, and catalog that information, that if what they said is true, then they then are able to open up and license their content and be searchable and discoverable and indexable. But if they lie, they lose their money. They lose their reputation. And it's something that carries with them and is interoperable no matter where they're publishing or creating. Monetization is this notion of unlocking the world. To the AP example, it is amazing in those, does anyone have Bitcoin or Ethereum or cryptocurrencies? So is that one person, two people? People may not want others to know. That may be the case. It is amazingly easy to purchase cryptocurrencies. It is amazingly easy to transfer money, right, to cryptocurrencies. When you try to Tom's example, right, when you deposit a check to your bank account and the process that that takes, there are many that believe that Bitcoin, right, is a store of value in the future of money because of the speed in which it transacts, right, because of the trustlessness and the ability to send money immediately to someone else and be able to have that go into their wallet without a central bank or authority approving. And then there's this idea of premium, which everyone in this room says we are a premium publisher. But Ben Thompson of Stratechery is a single publisher who is a premium publisher. And there will be more and more people who will see that reputation and value is going towards them as a creator and them as an author, and not necessarily the umbrella company that they work within. So how, going through all of this and thinking through this, do we prove that our content and our information is premium? So this is how we're really breaking down reputation at Po.et. Technically, it's extremely easy to do. We have plugins within all content management systems. There's integrations within Twitter and Medium and LinkedIn and anywhere where you value your IP. I often talk about content, but we're also thinking about IP value as someone who draws something in Microsoft Paint or Adobe Creative Cloud products. And how do we make sure that whenever they are creating something that they believe is valuable, that they want to build reputation behind and make available to the world, that we make it seamless for them to be able to do that? That when they press save or they press publish, that there is a hash of all of that information that is on the blockchain, that allows them to verify that information, that allows you as a consumer, right, if you are going to read something or watch something, right, with fake, what's happening with deepfakes on video, or images, that if you so choose to be able to say, OK, I watched this, I read this, but I want to see the information and the ingredients that went behind this in order to make sure that what I am reading is in fact what I think I am reading, then you now have the option to do so in a method that is not controlled, even somewhat, by the author themselves. So what does this look like? Wait for it. This. So this is how this ecosystem works right now. It is extremely confusing and complex. But these are how these decentralized services are communicating with one another. But what does it look like to normal people like us? And it could look somewhat like this, where when you are reading or engaging content or watching a video, you may want to know, can I trust this information? You may want to learn more about the information and how a story was written. An example I give is when you go to the New York Times and you're not a subscriber, one of the pop-ups that they use to engage you says, we helped bring the Me Too movement to life. Come support, right, what that means. But what if they were able to say, we brought the Me Too movement to life, and it took 15 writers, 20 editors, $500,000, a year and a half of investigative reporting, then you would say, shit, I'm paying for that. That's a lot of work. So what does it really mean, and how do we make it seamless for you to be able to get that information? To not necessarily just make it a consumer-facing value, for readers to be able to know that what they're watching is in fact what they think they're watching, to be able to see how it was sourced and how it's traveled the web to this area of creation. But then how do we build this consensus to go up against the Googles and the Facebooks and those that don't necessarily want to be the arbiters of what is real and what isn't real? And they've made that pretty clear. They made it clear when you would promote a post on Facebook as a newsroom that it was labeled a political ad, even though Mark Thompson of the Times said this. His New York Times cooking articles were labeled political ads. And Facebook, instead of really kind of digging down and thinking about it, they just got rid of it. Because they don't necessarily want to be the gatekeepers of how information gets to you. But if we could build something and have new signals that could help influence and help Facebook solve those problems, or help Google start putting reputation alongside recency and relevancy in certain algorithms and results, then we start being able to manifest our own destiny, right? We become proactive in our notion and our value of investment in what we consider premium. So this is what it looks like to normal people, but what we're really kind of working through with a bunch of publishers and a bunch of creators. What does web nutrition look like? In an age of fake news and deep fakes and image distortion, do we want to live in a world that we start exposing more information so that we could better understand what we're reading and better understand whether or not we could trust that information and value that information? For the record, I stole this image, so. Don't credit me. So again, why blockchain, though? And why blockchain is that reputation should be transparent, censorship resistant, and available for everyone. And that is what a blockchain is. So I'm not standing up here today and saying blockchain is going to solve all of our problems. I actually oftentimes say the opposite, because then you could learn more and dig deeper. But we are at a juncture where we have a technology that solves for those three things. Information accessible for all to see. It cannot be manipulated. What is there is there. It's censorship resistant. I was in Shanghai last week, and people are using Po.et as content management systems to deliver information so that IP addresses cannot be blocked, which I was warned before going on stage not to talk about because the government was there. And how do we make it available and accessible for everyone? The same way that Bitcoin and Ethereum and these currencies are accessible and usable however you wish, how can we make sure that these information systems can be done like so as well? And I'll just conclude with this notion that it's important to separate, especially as you think further into what blockchain is and what it means and what it could be for your companies, that there are two schools of thoughts. Hopefully the more annoying ones are on this first side, which is people who believe that Bitcoin is the future of money and the store of value and will replace the dollar, and they will fight you until they are right. And then there's this other side which believes that blockchain and decentralized computing could actually be the world's computer. Could actually be a way that we start building and thinking differently about technology's work and should be accessed, non-reliant on a single currency, but built on a collective whole of people really starting to build and think about what immutability, what incentivized systems, and what access to that information looks like for Web 3.0. And with that, I'm done. Am I staying?
Yes, you're staying, Jarrod, because we've got a very short amount of time, but I'm going to ask you one quick question. I think that was the best explanation of blockchain. I've heard a few that I've heard so far, and I'm getting there slowly. How should traditional media and indeed advertisers, marketers view Po.et? Should they view it with concern? I mean, is this going to actually help traditional media, or is it going to rival?
No, so I think the way that we are thinking about it, so one, it's an open technology and accessible, like it's open source. And what that technically means is that anyone could build anything on top of it. So there are applications that publishers may see value in that advertisers don't. There may be different things built on top, the same way that HTTP is the technology that powers the internet, but not every website is the same, and there's flexibility there. What I would say is that we are looking to bring more value and reputation on the creator herself, right? So not necessarily really just thinking about what the Washington Post means for David Fahrenthold and Marty Baron, but how do David Fahrenthold and Marty Baron build their equity in a world that starts to recognize the work and the values that they're bringing? What I would say outside of just speaking about Po.et is there is so much just bullshit out there when it comes to blockchain, especially when it comes to ad tech and information of advertising technology, where people are saying this is going to help all conversions be transparent, that you will now know where your money is going. I think it's foolish for any company to say that today they have a solution that is going to solve for certain things because it is so early.
You were talking about, say, Po.et up here, saying, look, you know, we're on the side of the angels, we're traditional media, we're right and to be trusted, social media aren't. And you disagree with that, and you're saying you can't actually...
Well, I don't necessarily disagree that the Australian isn't trustworthy and valuable. I disagree with the notion that consumers comprehend all of that. And I think you see that. You saw that with the New York Times op-ed piece that came out with the insider of within the Trump administration that came out with the op-ed last week. And consumers and readers were online saying, how could the New York Times spend money reporting on this?
Yeah.
And they cannot discern between editorial
So Po.et could
and opinion.
jumped in there.
Yes, so there is the opportunity to see information behind there. But going back to your question of whether premium brands are recognized by the readers and consumers themselves, I don't think that that's the case, because I don't think we spend enough time and energy conveying the work and the nuances and the value that goes into a newsroom and the processes in order to do so.
Have we got a couple of quick questions?
G'day, great presentation. I just wanted to ask about like the actual practice of, like we looked at that nutritional facts slide.
Yep.
Is that when the publisher is publishing the story online, then they put those facts in themselves?
Yep.
And then I'm just interested in the actual application there.
Yeah, it's a great question. And that's like a 40-minute presentation in itself, but I'll do it in a few seconds. So the beauty of blockchain and what we're talking about when we say distributed is that it isn't necessarily policed or centralized. So the publisher putting in that information and controlling that information wouldn't necessarily be beneficial, because it's a fox guarding the henhouse approach. The same readers who may question whether they should subscribe or what your content's value is aren't now going to believe you because you say we're the best. So that is why this solution of just blockchain in general is so important, because how that works is through the content management system and the way that you publish today, that information will be logged on the hash. And then you or somebody in the community, and Po.et is 50,000 plus now, but need to verify the claims that you are making. So is Jarrod Dicker the author of this? Well, yes, because we saw the article, and yes, he shared this on Twitter, so we verify that claim. Or are these sources the sources that they say they are? And people go in through tokens and are incentivized to either say that this is right or this is wrong. So it is actually a financial game where people are going in and incentivized to raise the truth and push down falsities. Now, can that be manipulated? Absolutely. When I say we're playing in the gray, I think that's important, because I think this notion of what's true or what's false, while is very real, and news media is objective to be covering that, consumers are all in this gray. So when we think about that, we don't necessarily say, well, Alex Jones of InfoWars can't verify his claims. He absolutely could. If Alex Jones wants to expose information behind how he creates InfoWars content, then it is true that he is the author. And it is true that 3 of his sources may be random people in North Dakota, right? But it's this idea of adding additional information that is not necessarily fox guarding the henhouse, that allows for more information to come about. Now, why do publishers care? Because publishers have the ethics built within their newsrooms that abide by all of these principles. So it's beneficial for them because they're already investing in it. This is just a way for them to convey further against other companies or incumbents or those that may be coming in that may be aggregating content or stealing content or misusing content. So there's a bunch of ways to do so that I could dive deeper, and I'll be around with what those actually are to walk through.
Brilliant.
Hi. I understand how this would be beneficial on a national and international level, but if we take it back to the example of Wagga Wagga, which has been coming up a lot today, I don't really understand, once your geographical footprint has shrunk, how those results and the reputational results wouldn't be skewed.
Can you dive further into that? So when you're...
Well, because obviously you've got a lot less people within that blockchain checking off on those things.
Oh, sorry. The blockchain is... So in the case of Po.et, it's the world's. There is no private access. Everything is public access. So if Washington Post decides to put information up on Po.et, anyone in the Australian can see it. They can see the information behind it. everything about it is publicized. So in your example of why that would be important, they may want to go in and find certain information based on their interest set, or based on certain topics, or based on their political views, right, or point of views, and may not want to go to Google, or may not want to go to Facebook or others, but actually be able to look through that. Now, what's scary, right, to go down a route of like, what could really happen in this autonomous system, is creators can now be paid autonomously, or readers can now curate information autonomously. So you may have issues where an Alex Jones, who is now banned from Facebook and Google and Twitter from distributing information, now has his website and is using something like Po.et to put information up there and is gaining payments from subscribers that may not necessarily want to be known that they are Alex Jones fans, but now they're able to fund to keep getting that information autonomously. So I think it really starts to open up this world dynamic of being able to access the information that you want seamlessly. That's why I say a lot of this is in the gray, because if you look for solving fake news, yes, Facebook could use Po.et as a system to discern what nutrition, right, they want versus what they don't want in a more seamless way. But there are people that are going to still smoke cigarettes, right, and drink a lot of alcohol, even though it says that, you know, this could be dangerous for you.
The dark blockchain.
Right, but on the blockchain.
OK, look, I'm sorry to cut it short, but we've got others coming. It was a fascinating talk. I just want to thank you so much, Jarrod Dicker. Please join me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.